Hi, and welcome to Fix This System. Gary Watershed once said, a bad system can destroy good people. And over the past few decades, organizations have brought in different frameworks, styles, methodologies, workflows in an effort to boost productivity, improve quality, and be competitive. And in the end, what has this given us? It's given us a lot of patchwork. And that patchwork has created different versions of Frankenstein's monster masquerading as organizations. Yes, they're functional. Things are being done, but it's inefficient and fragile. And if we go deeper into these organizations, we might see smaller versions of this monster just causing more and more chaos. And we've seen the monster. Movies, cartoons, TV. It's stiff, it's awkward, and it gets very frustrated when it's stressed. This here is about creating something different, something better, taming the monster and rebuilding the system. We want something that just doesn't work but evolves, where things are interconnected, adaptable, and designed to grow. The insanity of continuously patchworking, hoping that things get better, has to stop. And if we look at this, since 1980, based on a story by the World Bank Group, productivity has declined by 50%. So we need something more than just adapting to change. We need something that empowers the people to excel. In his book, Relentless, Tim S. Grover provides the concept of pressure and stress. In it, he talks about how we need pressure to grow, and I agree. Pressure drives us, it challenges us, and it pushes us. But here's the thing, there's a catch. He talks about how each of us have a limit to how much pressure we can take before it turns into stress. And when it turns into stress, that's when we get frustration, anger, and loss of motivation. So when we look at these systems, we need to understand that yes, the job gets done. Things are being developed. We have services that are being provided. It's just that they become inefficient and prone to breaking when they hit their own pressure threshold. It's like asking Frankenstein's monster to compete in a gymnastics competition. Sure, it might eventually hit a dismount, but it is going to be awkward and probably going to leave destruction all over the place. And to add to all this chaos, we have leadership styles that lack cohesion and processes that are not integrated. All this just continuously builds and creates more and more frustration, and it's inefficient across all the teams. So we got to stop building the pressure because eventually systems do break. And we need to think about this as a machine that just gets patched up over time. Yes, we can add quick fix upon quick fix without really addressing the real problem is going to add wear to that machine. At first, it's going to run, but it's just going to be harder to maintain in the end. And everything is just going to fall apart. Same thing happens in organizations. When we look at the symptoms and just patch over them without taking a good hard look at the real issue, things like team misalignment or poor communication, these are small problems when they're addressed, but they turn into big ones real quick if we just patch over the symptoms, not dealing with the issue. It's like ignoring that check engine light in your car, right? You put a piece of tape over it, it's not going to magically disappear. Same thing happens in organizations. Pieced together systems are not sustainable for organizations' survival in any industry. And hoping that it just deals with the pressure, it just doesn't cut it. We need to stop dealing with this insanity. And when we have organizational leadership, and I mean all of us as leaders, regardless of our title, we are leaders in our organizations. We must act now to have everyone embrace true adaptability, collaboration, and fully commit to continuous improvement. And what I'm talking about here is not sticking to one framework or one method. It's about evolving. We want to be able to create systems and leadership approaches that are flexible, adaptable, responsive, and designed to meet the needs for the moment. Years ago, I was introduced to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. When I saw it and heard his TED Talk, it changed how I approached what I do, personally and professionally. And as we look at fixing these broken systems, I want to adapt his concept. So As we know, we want to go from the why to the what. Well, a lot of talk on LinkedIn and messages and books, it says we need the right mindset. But when we have a mindset, if we look at the definition of a mindset, it means a mental attitude or a fixed state of mind. If we look at the circle, that falls under the what. And that doesn't create the same impact. What I'm talking about here is we need to move forward and from the middle. And there, the why is our ethos, our core characteristics, our core values. That's what's going to help us drive change. And we look at from there into the how, we have our mental models. Those are our frameworks that help us make sense of the world, solve problems, and guide our decisions. When we have a strong ethos, it helps build out these models that then shape our mindsets. And when we go in this direction, we have better focus and adaptability, enabling us to lead with conviction and create evolving systems. Think about this direction as evolutionary agility, where we work together in designing teams and processes that flex and adapt, regardless of the industry that we're in or the challenge. It's about creating systems that work for people, not the other way around. And when I talk about process, I just want to clarify this. I don't mean the processes that teams follow to get their work done. I mean interconnected processes across the organization. Things like the hiring, budget, and employee review process. The monster gets created when these processes are disconnected or clumped together. It's time to move beyond these labels and frameworks, right? We don't want to get caught up in methodologies. We need to focus on behaviors, adaptability, and outcomes. That's what's going to drive success. Building these systems that empower the people to do what's best for them and the organization, that's how we're going to get those frameworks and methodologies to work, and as we adapt these tools and processes to focus on what needs to get done in providing value. When we have processes and leadership styles that are patched together, we build debt. And for anyone that has worked in software development, think of this as technical debt, but different. This is process debt. Process debt is even worse because now there's failure when things happen and there's just more and more frustration. And we've all experienced this when pressure becomes overwhelming. Things come to a halt. And then what do we get? We get firefighter meetings that just turn into finger pointing. We have escalation emails that just heighten frustration, fear, and anger. We just don't have to be stuck in this cycle anymore. Let's start stripping away these labels, these biases, and focusing on what matters, the people, empowering individuals and teams to rise above these limitations. When we shift this focus, we can build systems that evolve. And we want to go more than just, we know that organizations need more than just efficient processes or strong leadership. Overall, we need a system that is integrated, adaptable, and capable of growing. So, and the good thing is that we've all experienced the solution. We're all part of ecosystems in nature, in community, in our own bodies. These ecosystems show how interconnected elements can work effectively and efficiently to create balance and growth. Now, imagine this concept in your organization. Environments where every piece, team, process, and individual works together towards shared goals. A system where interactions between its parts are just as important as the parts themselves. So we want to understand that everything plays a vital role in what we do. In nature, the success of an ecosystem depends on the interactions between its elements. How well these elements work together determine whether it lives or dies. The same thing can be said for organizations. So machines, though, they communicate through processes, right? So if, ands, the language, do this, do that. But humans, on the other hand, we need more. We can't just give teams instructions like collaborate effectively. Processes help us guide our work, but they don't teach us how to connect, communicate, or build trust with one another. Humans need more than just instructions, pure and simple. unfortunately, it is often overlooked. When teams, tools, and processes are aligned, and when human interactions are prioritized, the ecosystem becomes more than functional. It's efficient, adaptable, and capable of delivering lasting value. So let's imagine a sales and customer support team working in sync in this ecosystem. The sales team focuses on new customers, providing solutions, and setting expectations to close deals, while the support team delivering on those promises, is focusing on customer satisfaction and resolving issues as they come up. When you have a sales team that provides the context to needs and expectations to the support team, they better understand how to deal with those calls when they come in. On the other hand, support teams, they provide insights from these interactions, right? They highlight the recurring issues, or they give opportunities to improve their product or service. This feedback loop ensures that both teams work towards their shared goals, which is delivering exceptional customer service and customer value while maintaining organization's reputation. So what if they're not in sync? What if communication channels are obstructed? We get friction. Say like the sales team overpromises without talking to support, right? These unrealistic expectations, they lead to dissatisfied customers and strained relationships. Whereas if we have a support team that sees ways to tailor pitches, improve offerings, but doesn't share that with the sales team, it just creates a disconnect, disrupting the flow of information and decision making. In the end, weakening that ecosystem and it's the ability to adapt and respond to those needs. We aim to build a work environment that mirrors the best aspects of a natural ecosystem, where everything works together effectively and efficiently. We want an environment where interactions flow, collaboration is second nature, and the system becomes greater than the collective intelligence. It goes beyond function. It's about evolving. We want to adapt to challenges, empower everyone to reach past their limits. And as with any change, there's excitement and hesitation. My hope is excitement, right? Humanocracy talks about how humans actually need and do like change. But I do understand that there could be some hesitations. So let me go through some of the questions I get on this topic in other conversations. So what if the changes create more confusion and disruption in the workflow? Well, I know we've all been bitten by previous attempts to make changes that at work, and that type of thought and that question comes up from a pessimist bias. Right? We got to understand that not all changes are the same, and it doesn't have to affect the workflow. What we're building here is something where we're adding clarity and continuous improvement. We're not here to drive any chaos. The next one would be, I've heard this one a lot, like, oh, this just feels like a management trend, right? I've seen this where management brings in a change, they provide the training, and then that's it, and it goes nowhere, right? That's a lot of energy wasted. And I'm not talking, and worse yet, let's imagine like they're just repackaging old concepts and just trying to pass it off as new and improved. For me, like the two that come to my mind is like a shift left or modern management, right? We're not creating bandwagons or buzzwords, right? Or any new frameworks. This is about like going away from these shiny boxes and looking towards something that is a fundamental shift to an organization's operations. It's about creating a system that will last and evolve, not live through that patchwork. Right? This system is prioritized by behaviors, adaptability, and collaboration. That's what drives results. So there's no check the boxes exercises here. Right? This is getting a long-term investment in building environments that succeed for years. And one of the last things I usually hear is, I doubt leadership will commit to this. Well, true leader, like it's true. Leaders are accustomed to certain things and the bureaucracy that has been around for a long while, right? System has been built and we just need to retool it. We just need to fix it, and it's struggling. So we need to understand that we understand how you feel about the change. And there are still issues currently going on. But in doing this, we can have the leaders understand that this is like think about this as they're the life-giving parts of the ecosystem, right? That's what's going to help everything and others grow. So in the end, we need to create the conditions for meaningful evolution, right? We want to make sure that we're highlighting the long-term benefits, which is just ensuring better flow and value, improving that productivity, right? Like I said, from the 80s till now, global productivity has dropped by 50%. We can improve that by creating this evolution with ethos, mental models, and the mindset flow. We need to understand as well is that this doesn't happen overnight, but we can make these small changes that have greater impacts down the road, where it's going to lead to adaptability and purpose. This is not an initiative. This is an opportunity to build something sustainable, impactful, and increasing well-being that drives success for everyone. Right? I understand these fears, objections, and doubts. I have had plenty of conversations on this subject, and they're all valid. So we need to understand that we need to start tackling this head on with a positive conflict approach, right? And true collaboration that will allow us to begin creating our organization's ecosystem, one that empowers teams, fosters collaboration, and drives success. So, hi, I know I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Jeremy Barrio. I've been working in organizations. I started back in '93 working for a bank. Over the years, I started off as an analyst, progressed up to middle management, to executive, to senior leadership in an organization. Throughout that time, yes, as I grew and I understood and how to build teams, once I hit the limit of an acting CTO, I found out that that wasn't really truly my goal in what I wanted to do going forward. My goal is to help teams, and that's my passion. I want things to evolve and become better. I want everyone to have a good day at work, provide lots of value, and enjoy. I want people to be able to feel that they jump out of bed to go to work and enjoy their efforts. So today I'm not here. Yes, I am speaking, but I'm here as a guide. I'm not saying that some of these things are going to work, some things are not going to work. I feel that what we have here is something to make positive change and use that to be adaptable and effective in what we do. So going back to an ecosystem, right? We've had it in our personal lives, even like our families, our communities, and our social circles, right? They are stronger when the elements work within together, right? When there's effortlessly supporting and uplifting one another. That's how things work in our personal lives. Things should be the same in our work life. It's not different, right? We want every individual and team and process to play a vital role in the broader organization's ecosystem. We want where everything aligns and the system as a whole evolves. All of us as leaders must take accountability and keep the accountability of others for the health and success of our ecosystems. With that, I'm going to adapt something from W. Edwards Deming, what he said years ago. The role of leaders is to change the system, not badger individuals to do better. When the system is broken, no amount of individual effort is going to fix it. It's up to each of us to work together to build an environment where teams can grow. Leadership is a shared responsibility. We all have a role. We're working together to drive lasting positive change in our work environments. It doesn't have to be some undead monster, barely functioning and frustrating. Let's move past that. Let's focus on the behaviors, true collaboration, and embracing adaptability. That's what's going to transform that monster into an ecosystem. And it's not just alive, but it's evolving. Remember, we're moving away from patching and clumping. We are here to build something that operates smoothly. right? Something that's efficient and effective and resilient in adapting to whatever challenges come. We want to create something where it has a higher pressure threshold, right? Something where we can deliver with whatever's thrown at it. This transformation changes require one big thing. These changes need changes in behavior at every level. Again, the example I gave earlier of just doing training, right? Training or implementing a framework will go nowhere. And it's just going to be a waste of time, money, and it's just going to add more to that monster. It's going to turn into that fleeting fad that we don't want. We need to start with our ethos, our why. And then it gets easier to accept creating a more motivational environment where change has become a reality. And throughout this, there are many principles that can guide us through this evolution. Today, I want to focus on 3 foundational principles. These principles don't solve everything on their own, but they lay the groundwork to meaningful change and sets the path for the organization to achieve its own growth and evolution. Remember, leadership starts with ethos, a set of behaviors and characteristics anyone can embody. And we want to keep in mind that as we go through these principles and tools, ask yourself what characteristics and values you feel are needed to make these work. And one of the first principles I want to start with is adaptive leadership, right? Traditional leadership, we have rigid hierarchies, fixed roles, and slow progress, right? That just doesn't work. It's not helping in today's world. But when we look at adaptive leadership, we're empowering everyone. We're adjusting our roles and styles and strategies based on the specific challenges and opportunities, right? This draws from 2 approaches. We've all heard of servant leadership, but there's also transformational leadership as well. Now, servant leadership and transformational leadership is not new, right? Servant leadership came in the 1970s. Transformational leadership came in the 1980s. And we know that servant leadership focuses on removing obstacles, supporting their teams, and fostering trust and collaboration. Whereas transformational leadership is about inspiring, motivating, and aligning teams' visions with the organization's overachieving goals. Together, they create a model that shifts the command and control to team empowerment that are motivated to achieve collective goals. Right? Adaptive leadership is about inclusivity, right? Where everyone contributes in a meaningful way, from analyst to a senior executive. It recognizes that leadership is dynamic and situational, requiring flexibility, empathy, and the ability to respond to the needs for the moment. Years ago, in research by Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky, they underscore the importance of this approach in navigating complexity and uncertainty. They say that leaders need to be able to get on that balcony and gain a perspective, diagnose challenges, and adjust strategies accordingly. The ability to step back and adapt fosters resilience and innovation within teams. We also have Leadership Quarterly. They provided studies that show how adaptive leadership has a significant positive impact on teams' performance and engagement. Along with increased ability to handle high-pressure situations, the adaptive leadership provides the ability for teams to evolve. Right? This empowers individuals at all levels to step up into a leadership role when needed. This is how we're going to foster collaboration, increase resilience, and it leads to sustainable success for everyone. When we look at the next principle, I'm talking about narrative-driven culture. We've all heard about storytelling. Well, this is how we leverage the power of storytelling. We want to build connections, we want to share knowledge and help drive change. Research by Stanford University found when we use stories, they're 22 times more memorable than standalone facts. Right? We want to increase the ability to inspire and engage, right? Encouraging everyone to share experiences like overcoming challenges, a milestone, lessons learned. We want to basically it creates an environment where everyone feels valued and understood. And storytelling is more than sharing information. It fosters empathy and helps align teams to a shared purpose. It's about the narrative that helps inspire, right? We want to motivate. We want to connect with one another. And here's an example. Let's talk about, like, here's a quarterly a graph from a normal quarterly report as an example. We've seen stuff like this where they say, okay, here's our productivity over the past 6 months. Okay, we see the dip and we see the improved productivity, but how long does this information stay in your mind when you see something like this? Where, let's talk about, if we put it into a story, like this, for example. Now, we've introduced a new tool, we've implemented it, we saw a 15% drop as we began using this system. The teams worked together through collaboration, training sessions, and our continuous feedback. In the end, we saw an increase of 25% in productivity, more than what we expected. I am so proud of the team's determination and collective work to overcome this obstacle. Now, that seems something a little more memorable, right? Right, this is the difference. We want to be able to transform raw data to a compelling narrative, right? Make metrics memorable, right? We want to provide that human aspect of the resilience and success. We showed these shared purposes and sharing information. It cultivates a culture of trust, innovation, and collective success. Right? It strengthens internal relationships, it drives individuals, and the organization grows in the end. Making everyone feel connected to a larger journey and shared goals goes a long way in motivating individuals. And we look at the last foundational purpose I want to talk about is behavioral economics. And we use this to enhance our decision making. Behavioral economics, it explores how psychological, social, and emotional factors influence our decisions. Often, leading our decisions will deviate from pure logic based on these behavioral economics. Things like cognitive bias, right? In the workplace, anchoring, confirmation bias, or loss aversion, those are a few cognitive bias that regularly happen in any workplace. Organizations have the ability to design environments that help guide individuals towards smarter, more intentional decisions by understanding these bias. For example, framing options to emphasize long-term over short-term benefits, or make more strategic decisions over tactical. We want to create models to help with decision fatigue. Teams might choosing, for example, 2 projects. One has quick potential, they have some quality risk, but the other one is long and it's more sustainable, more susceptible, right? Teams can go through the options by reframing, right? Understanding the long-term benefits means less rework and higher customer satisfaction. Using stuff like a pros or cons matrix, it just helps us from overthinking and it fosters healthy deliberation. Behavioral economics provides tools to make decision making more encouraged, where we encourage the clarity, right? We want to ensure there's collaboration and that everything is aligned with the overall organization goals. This approach improves choices, team dynamics, and drives stronger outcomes. Some research done by Richard Thaler and Case Sustine in their book Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness, it demonstrates how small changes in how we make choices are presented can influence our behavior. Their concept of choice architecture, that's been used in a lot of other workplaces and organizations, and it helps create a system where everyone's empowered to make thoughtful, effective decisions while aligning their long-term objectives. Remember, these 3 principles are a starting point. Other principles such as system thinking, empathy-driven collaboration, purpose-driven alignment, for example, They play a crucial role in creating our ecosystem. And we're building an ecosystem requires trust, collaboration, and alignment between individuals and organizational goals. Starting with adaptive leadership, narrative-driven culture, and behavioral economics is the foundation for evolving environments. And that's what's going to have the organization grow stronger and be more resilient over time. So in adaptive leadership, one of the tools we have is situational decision making. Right? You're tailoring decisions based on the unique context of a given situation. You're not relying on specific policies or like a one size fits all solution. It's like, because we know no two challenges are the same. They may be similar, but they're not the same based on the context of what's going on at that time. Leaders need to assess things like the circumstances, the team dynamics, the organization goals. We need to understand that it's a contextual awareness that we all need to understand to make situational decision making work. We want to understand the people that are involved, the urgency, the complexity, and the impact, short and long term. This allows us to be flexible, creative, and responsive, ensuring our choices are effective and they align with organization values and goals. It's about making those thoughtful decisions that balance structure and adaptability, especially in high pressure or uncertain environments, right? For me, I've worked in organizations, I've led teams, and I call it the rule of three. And this gives them the teams, they give them an understanding of how they can make decisions before they need to escalate or what they need to do. Right? It provides that guidance of how everyone works together. So my rule of three was, and I based this off a colleague of mine from 30 years ago when I was working. The decision going to potentially have us show up in the newspaper in a negative way? Does the decision have the potential to cost the organization money or lose money? Does this potential decision have the ability to potentially lose customer data or potentially harm customers? If the answer is no, all that gives them the kind of guidance to move forward to improve that value. Whereas if the answer is yes on any of those, then they need to start either rethinking or bring in more people, more eyes to help provide a better decision as to what needs to be done. Right. So this is how decision making can be done. This is how it can make it more easy for everyone to understand and give them the trust to do it, instead of giving them something that they have to knock on the manager's door every day because something comes up where they need to make a decision. The importance of situational decision is making it as a tool. Right? We want to focus on the current context and the situation challenges. We want to be able to make sure that they are addressed effectively. Right? By doing this, you're going to build trust, engagement, and accountability within the teams. It's about equipping them with tools and flexibility to make the thoughtful decisions while using these behavioral economics. When we look at narrative-driven culture, for me, I've used leadership storytelling initiatives. Right? We want to focus on equipping leaders with tools and the confidence to use storytelling that inspire, connect, and drive change. For me, I've used storytelling initiatives. Initially I was one of those people that like to just give straight stats. And over time, I found that giving straight stats have people have their eyes glaze over. So I started adding more to a story, adding more empathy and understanding so that everyone can clearly see the vision and what I'm trying to communicate. Remember, this is going to build trust and emotional resonance within the teams. Because again, 22 times more memorable than standalone stats. When we use initiatives and workshops and coaching, we also use programs like Everything Disc, help storytelling by the leaders be more effective, right? The ultimate goal is to create a culture where storytelling becomes a tool for alignment, motivation, and builds shared sense of purpose, right? I worked for an organization once where, again, this was very formal. They did what the senior executives provided, just straight stats and information. And when they provided this at a town hall, the biggest part of the conversation that was done afterwards was how big the coffee line is going to be after the town hall was done. I circled up with these executives, and as we talked, we understood that there needs to be change, because we understood that there was not a lot of motivated individuals within the team. They did feel that things were just not there. There was something missing. So in there, we did a kind of quick root cause analysis on what we can do. And I brought up storytelling. And they were a little leery about it, because for them, they were used to just telling straight facts. So it was hard for them to move away from this dry data. So we just created initiatives where we started telling each other stories, where we started kind of helping each other improve. And instead of just kind of showing graphs, right, we were able to provide a good story along with it, where that conversation about how long the coffee line is going to be was not there, because everyone was now engaged. They saw where everything was going. They were now motivated to help improve the organization going forward, right? In the end, we found that meetings were more valuable because more information was not only being shared, but it was being stored by everyone. They were able to walk away from meetings to be more effective in what they were doing, right? They were able to see the impact of their work, or hear the impact of their work, right? It helped with sharing lessons learned, right, from challenges. It helps inspire others. So one of the key things we saw in all this was, like most organizations, we track employee satisfaction. Well, we saw within the first 6 months, there was a 30% increase in employee satisfaction. We saw teams were using storytelling, and they were being more engaged in their roles and what they were doing. A lot of this was just improved motivation, and it was a small change in helping share information by using storytelling. This demonstrates the power of human connection and drives success, right? We're no more using transactional communication, right? We want to use authentic, purpose-driven narratives so that leaders can inspire teams, foster trust, and create a culture of alignment and engagement. And our last tool we're going to talk about here is from behavioral economics, right? And helping our decision making. And it is overcoming cognitive bias. And I've talked about cognitive bias before. And if you don't know what cognitive bias is, or are not familiar with the definition, in the end, it is basically a mental shortcut or a pattern, right? It helps, and in the end, it leads to potentially flawed decision making, especially in complex environments. From an analogy, think about it this way. I don't know if you've been in a funhouse with mirrors, or you've seen a funhouse with mirrors on movies and TV. When we look at them, they distort our image, right? Cognitive bias distorts our perceived information, right? Certain details become bigger, or certain details are smaller that skew our perspective. By overcoming these biases, like finding a normal mirror, it allows us to see the full picture truly as it is, no distortions. And with that, we're able to make better informed decisions, right? Unlike the mirror, where we can see how things are, cognitive biases are not easily found, right? And they sometimes operate unconsciously. And that impacts how we interact, how we perceive information, and make our choices. So here are a couple common cognitive bias that occur. I mentioned before, confirmation bias. That leads us to favor information that supports our pre-existing beliefs, often ignoring data that contradicts them. We've all heard of groupthink, right? This causes teams to avoid dissent in favor of everyone getting along, right? That can impede innovation and critical thinking. And I know I just talked about storytelling that draws from our experience and addressing cognitive bias involves framing and analyzing, right? We want to use the information at hand to guide our decisions. We want to recognize when information might point to an alternative conclusion. That is key in making a well-informed, objective decision. Overcoming cognitive bias involves 3 steps. 1, we have to identify it. We have to have the ability to recognize when and where biases are influencing decisions. We have to challenge the assumptions, encouraging critical thinking and fostering diverse perspectives to question our ingrained habits. And we want to be able to create a bias-free system, right? We want to design processes and tools and environments where we minimize the likelihood of a bias affecting our outcome. Organizations can improve decision-making, foster innovation, and create stronger, more effective teams by addressing cognitive bias. We can't eliminate them altogether, but once we understand and identifying and managing them, will help us make better decisions. Right? And I'm sure you've heard stories like this, or you've experienced stories like this, where we're trying to implement maybe a new workflow. And I've experienced this, where we want to do this to improve collaboration and efficiency. Well, there's going to be resistance from leadership because they feel with their confirmation bias that how things are working doesn't need to change. Right? They cherry pick data, or they have anecdotes to support their thoughts. In the end, they become even complacent to when issues do arise because of the processes. So things we needed to do, for me, what we did to help improve this and then remove the bias was we held a workshop, right? We understood with the teams and the managers what we needed to truly do to identify, is this the right decision to make? And one of the key things I did here when I started this workshop was understand that we were not being critical of any individual in the room. We are there to kind of identify inefficiencies and see where we can work together to find the right point that needs to be fixed. Right? One of the things we did was we used data to support the inefficiencies. Right? We used it in a storytelling fashion to get our point across. And we had everyone share their experiences. Right? It helped understood that there were pain points that were being overlooked. Now, not only was this system implemented with acceptance, because the managers saw truly how it impacted everyone else, and they also saw the numbers of that impact, because they didn't fully understand, because again, their confirmation bias, they just cherry picked the data that they had. And this, in the end, helped create a more innovative environment, because now everyone came up with different ideas to make things better. And even the leadership and the managers helped out with that. So it improved decision making. It fostered our innovation, right? It created a more cohesive team between the teams and the management. So when we identify these bias, when we challenge the system, we get the right information to make the best decision in that moment. So we started with Frankenstein's monster, right? It's masquerading as an organization. And this has all happened because of the challenge of us just patching frameworks or creating fragmented systems. The analogy I use is it's very common to see in organizations because we are all frustrated employees at one point in a day, right? We've all experienced where we're working through something and then something comes up where it just halts or it calls for an urgency in dealing with it. Right? Organizations have a collective debt, right? We have a process debt. And that process debt, if we think about it from a technical debt, is worse than the technical debt because that process debt is impacting everyone in the organization, and it's hard to fix. And if we keep going in this fashion of patching things together, the process debt is going to just build and build and build until it just breaks. That's why I like using the term like an ecosystem. And there's been other books and talks that use similar words and fashions, that this is how a work environment needs to focus on, right? We need to focus where every element functions in sync, right? We want to focus more on the human aspect and have emphasis on collaboration, adaptability, and continuous improvement. We want to create something that's more than functional. We want something that evolves. Like when we just went through these foundational principles, that's going to help with the evolution, right? When you use adaptive leadership, and by embracing flexibility in leadership roles, empowers teams to meet dynamic needs, right? While fostering a culture of innovation and adaptability. You have narrative-driven culture, right? This is the power of storytelling to strengthen connections and share knowledge and to inspire. And then you have behavioral economics, right? You want to create systems that support smarter, more intentional choices, right? By recognizing cognitive biases and designing a system that guides the teams towards better decisions, right? Before, I've talked about the fears, objections, and doubts, right? The confusion to skepticism, right? I tried to tackle some of these concerns, right? I used some evidence and provide some actionable solutions. We need to focus on providing the right information to support the changes we need to make, right? With all of this, I hope it helps, right? I hope it helps you build a foundation for you and your organization for a smooth, more controlled transition from an undead monster to an evolving ecosystem. So here are some of the call to actions, right? Here's some of the things that you can do now that helps create that ecosystem using these 3 principles. One of the things is you can create a change catalyst team. And I know organizations have similar functions like this, but get more involved in something like that if there is one, right? You want to have a diverse set of individuals in that team, right? From different departments. Right? This team is going to be pioneering that evolution through experimentation with the principles of adaptive leadership, narrative-driven culture, behavioral economics, to help build that foundation. Right? So for me, and I built more on this. This presentation was built off of a presentation I did at Agile 2023. And it was about evolving and spreading. Right? Spreading the information and spreading the evolution, right? Teams will see what this team is doing, and they're going to want to see the benefit. They're going to see the benefits, and they're going to want to involve, right? Another thing you can do is host a future of work hackathon. And this is something that we've all heard of hackathons, but I think this is something that can really make an enormous change for the organization. Because in hackathons where you're trying to design a new system or design a new product, this one here, you're trying to reimagine how the work processes and the culture work. This is where you encourage collaboration and develop creative solutions or even prototypes of processes that embody the interconnectedness of an ecosystem. And maybe start launching a storytelling campaign. You want to initiate a campaign where employees share stories of personal and professional transformation, right? You want to highlight narratives that reflect the impact of embracing change and innovation. You want to help that narrative-driven culture reinforced by value of trust, adaptability, and growth. And you want to design a cognitive bias awareness experiment. And I think this one here, I think this would really help even like all the teams as we go through, right? You want to create an experiment where you identify and address cognitive bias, There are cards out there. There's a deck of playing cards. It's by, I think if you go to www.yourbias.is, they have a set of cards of different cognitive bias. And you can use that in games. I've used it, right? You want to be able to select a process or a scenario where we identify any biases that come up as we work through that scenario. Remember, we want to avoid the shortcuts. We want to avoid distorting of information, right? We want to develop strategies that find, mitigate, and decide, not have one person do the thing for the team. This isn't a team event, right? These experiments will help reveal these biases, right? They help make informed decision, improve clarity and collaboration. And in the end, doing that, you can share with other teams. Much like my talk in 2023, it's shared. You're able to share and push information and it spreads, right? This is what's going to help inspire them to conduct their own experiments. In the end, you will help build a more thoughtful, objective decision-making culture. So we've got to move away from these cobbled together processes. Like we want to get away from this undead being that has a low threshold of pressure, right? It's inefficient and misaligned, right? We want to end the frustration for everyone. We want to create an ecosystem where every element is in sync, adaptability is second nature, and collaboration drives meaningful outcomes. So the question now, how do we take what we've learned and put it into action? This is where the real work begins, right? The time to move on beyond identifying the problem and start building the solution. Let's take those first steps towards creating a dynamic ecosystem that empowers your teams to drive growth.